You ready? We're good? We're going? Good morning. Thanks for tuning in for Investment Insight on Facebook Live. Thank you guys for coming in today and on YouTube. A couple fun facts. I don't know if you guys saw this or not, but anything you guys want to talk about, we're great to talk about. This week I've got a few smaller topics that kind of go with stuff. But since the start of the pandemic, home ownership costs have absolutely soared. If you look at the election this year, the number one issue is inflation. And what's funny is both candidates, to my knowledge, have no solution for it. They just blame the other, but I've not seen an actual solution. The solution is very simple. If you print less money, you have less money, inflation will stop. It's not hard, but it is hard. So the typical buyer is spending $1,510 more a month than they did for a house in March of 2020. The median home price for a house was $436,291. That is a pretty high level of price. I remember when I was trying to get one of my best friends to move here to Manchester from St. Louis to come work here, and we found all these houses for $80,000 and $90,000 that were 2,000 square feet. and those same houses today are $400,000. And that has not even been 10 years ago. So that just shows you how much inflation. Now, the top 5 states for the increases in home prices are Utah, is up 44%. Idaho is up 39%. Hawaii is up 38%. By the way, these are all people moving from California. You know, if you look at the numbers, right? And then tied for the last 2 is Montana with 36% and Tennessee at 36%. And so it's funny is the 4 highest states that are seeing people going up are mainly seeing, Montana, Hawaii, Idaho, Utah. That's mainly Californians leaving California. That's that's my opinion, of course. And then Tennessee is a blend of a lot of other people from everywhere. Home maintenance was the largest increase in cost. If you guys look at when you look at home maintenance, we all knew there was going to be a problem because for many years, there's been 2 people retiring in the construction industry for every 1 person going in that job. And so when you start looking at, I was actually looking at some plumbers that came to our offices, and they're actually getting about $250 an hour to get a plumber now. Hey, Jack. Because you don't have enough people that want to do the job. And so, and actually, I didn't prepare this, but a lot of people that are going to college are not going to college now because they're looking at trade schools because of the economics. If you actually saw for the first time, I think the initial reporting is we don't know the incoming class, but about a 2% drop in the number of people going to college right now because of these numbers. And because college just keeps going up high as well. But it's interesting, but one of the things, and we'll talk about this a little later, is maybe renting isn't that bad of a deal. Because when you start looking at some of these numbers and what's happening is landlords have not raised their rents enough to cover the costs in general. And we'll go over some of that data in a second. But today, obviously Investment Insights in the educational space, we do our best to provide information. Please seek out competent legal, tax, and accounting and financial advice to your needs before you make a decision. But kind of what we had today for facts is, the 2024 election won't be the same voters who chose Biden. We're talking about some of the demographic trends for the election this year. How to still get a 3% mortgage. Of course, artificial intelligence and the stocks involving that. Saudi Arabia's hunt for cash. And of course, the Federal Reserve starts meeting today, but they'll start announcing and talking tomorrow. So we'll talk about that today. So there was a really great piece. And if you want to Google something, if you Google Bloomberg 2024 election demographic differences, it's a really in-depth piece on what the population of the United States looks like today. Now, we talked about people from California moving to Utah, Idaho, Hawaii, and Montana. There's been a lot of people moving to Tennessee. So a lot of the people that live in this community, you're actually seeing out of the last 3 elections, the highest amount of people that have left communities to go to other places. So a lot of the data that they use on elections is probably not going to be perfectly accurate because we don't know exactly who moved here and how they're going to vote. You know, one of the things, I used to lift weights with a gentleman who was an elected official here in Coffee County, and he was a member of the Republican Party. And what he said was, the Republican Party knows how every person votes in the state of Tennessee down to their house and their street. The Democratic Party, too, same thing. But when you bring in a lot of people that aren't from here, they're going to vote, who knows? Now, we'll know after the election, but you don't know today. And that of course, I assume our biggest investment inside this year will be on Election Day this year. But we'll see how that goes. But there's been some things that have happened since the last election. First thing is there's been some COVID deaths. There's been some other deaths. And then there's been a lot of migration outflows and migration inflows. One of the biggest things we're seeing in America for population, the biggest change in the electorate is people moving between states. A lot of people are moving to different states. And a lot of people are culturally moving to states that more are like them. Like if you're, so I'll give you an example. So, well, I'll get that in a second. Then also teens, aging in. And then naturalizations, people that become American citizens. You know, it's very well known that certain immigrant groups vote certain ways. You know, if you look at recent data, people that moved here from Puerto Rico, of course, they're already American citizens. They tend to vote more Democratic. People that have moved here from Cuba and Venezuela tend to vote more Republican. So if you look at the state of Florida, and you say, well, why is Florida no longer a toss-up state? It's because a lot of Venezuelans and a lot of Cubans have moved to Florida. And you see this in Miami. Miami is probably your biggest election difference. If you looked at the last election cycle, remember when President George W. Bush ran for office? What was the one state that mattered the most? What was the one county that mattered? Dade County. Well, Dade County voted Republican last time. And Dade County was very, very Democratic before that. And so what you've seen in Florida is a lot of the people that lived in Miami-Dade County that were more democratically lined, they moved up north towards Broward County, towards Fort Lauderdale. And a lot of people that moved here, if they were immigrants from Cuba and Venezuela, moved to Miami-Dade County. And they shifted the entire electorate based on that. And this is what we're talking about here today for this next election. And so there's going to be 31 million more eligible voters in this election than there was last time. 31 million more people eligible to vote. Now, we all know only about half of people, the 60%, register to vote. And only about half of those people actually vote. But we've had high turnout the last 2 elections. We've had more people voting than normal. So there's a good chance that this election, there's going to be more people voting as a percentage, which I think is a good thing. And so some states have seen 15% population voting changes. 15% more people. Or 15% people. So I'll give you examples. So Pennsylvania, 984,000 people left Pennsylvania, and 1.1 new million people moved in. Georgia, 782,000 left, but 1.1 million came in. Arizona has seen a very high growth in non-white voters, with almost 40% of their new population being non-white voters. The whole state, 40% of the whole state is non-white. But Republican increased their registration lead by 110,000 more voters. If you guys remember, in Arizona, that election was decided by 11,000 votes. And so if you look at who's going to win the election, and this is kind of the end of the story, it's whoever gets their people to the polls. Because it's going to be a close election. That's my personal view. African American migration, African Americans are migrating en masse to the city of Atlanta. And so, if you look at it, over 40% of Georgia's population is now non-white. Wisconsin has had almost no change in their election. People, because no one's moved to Wisconsin. I can't imagine why. It's cold and terrible, but it's it's basically going to stay the same. But you can also register on election day in Wisconsin. So if you remember last election, more people voted in the election than were registered in the previous one, because you can register and vote on the same day. And so when we look at this data, when people say, well, we know who's going to win, we know it's going to win, we all know that we have an electoral college, right? So it does not matter if you get 50.1% in the polls. It matters, do you get 50.1, or we're going to have a bunch of third-party candidates, do you get a majority in that state? Because if you look at, a great example, the 2016 election, there was a lady named Jill Stein, and she ran under the Green Party. And she took enough votes away from Hillary Clinton, most likely, that Donald Trump was able to win the election. The next time she didn't run, but a good libertarian did run against Donald Trump, and guess who won that election by 1%? Joe Biden. But now you have this new wrinkle, right? There's 31 million more people voting now, or eligible to vote. So you got probably about 15 or 16, maybe 17 million more people that are going to vote that have not voted before. So how are they going to vote? Anyway, that's going to be interesting, I think. And so it's always fun because one thing you can do is if you start looking at some of these counties, especially in cities, like if you start looking at the area around Atlanta or the areas, here's a great example. So 34 or 35% more people voted in the city of Atlanta than the previous election. Well, this makes more sense, right? Well, if there's a lot more African American people moving to Atlanta, there's more people living there, there's going to be more voters. And that definitely decided who won the state of Georgia. Who's those people voting. And if you look at like turnout models, if you go to like Dalton, so Dalton tends to be Republican strong, the city of Dalton, and Atlanta tends to be Democratic strong. So if you want to have some fun election night, you can be a nerd like me, you can actually pull up the data of who's voted, what percentage of the vote's in, and you can start running models on who's going to win the election before they call it. Because you can see if Dalton looks high on turnout and Atlanta's low, you pretty much know who wins Georgia. But it kind of changes, right? Because in the past, if Miami-Dade was high, that wasn't good for Republicans, but it was good last time. So you can play all the data. So anyway, I thought that's pretty cool. But this is just a fun statistic about for many years in our country, you didn't see a lot of people moving around. We've seen a lot of people move around, and that's the millennials. Because if you look at the most people moving around are younger and more ethnically diverse than that's who's moving around. Because people are trying to figure out where they're going to settle down. Once you settle down, once you get your kids in school, you don't want to move. And all these millennials have started becoming adults when? The last 4 or 5 years. Or not all of them, but a lot of them. And so that makes a big difference. Okay. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about this? Don't tell me who to vote for. I don't want to hear that. Anybody have any questions about that or anything else? The data. Well, so, you have to be a legal citizen to vote. I do know, my dad's an election official in Tennessee. And Tennessee, they're pretty strict. So, because I know there was some crazy quack job people in McMinnville that weren't even from there that were complaining about the voting machines. So my dad's an engineer, and he's like, I'll bring a voting machine. You guys come see it. It's not connected to the internet. I'm the one in charge of it. And my dad's a Republican election official. And somebody was one of the Democratic people did not bring her food in. And he said, well, you can't leave. The rules are, you come in, you bring your lunch, we check you, you check me. If you didn't bring the food, you're going to be stuck. 9 o'clock tonight. Hope you can make it fasting. Because he follows the rules. And that's what my dad is. He follows the rules. He's 100% a rule follower. That's how he's always been my entire life, trust me. And so the voting machines are fine. Now, I don't know about other states. Obviously, if you look at the data, it's pretty clear that most of the people voting are legal citizens of the United States. And it's funny because people are always talking about that situation. But the Venezuelan people, which has been a huge part of the immigration bloc, they're voting Republican. And the people from Honduras and those areas are voting Democratic. So based on who, and the thing too is, people are more likely to move to a state that shares their values. You know, a lot of people moving to Tennessee are Republicans. They might be moving here from New York or California, but they still are Republicans. A lot of people that move to California are Democratic. And so what you see in our country, for better or worse, I think it's kind of worse, is a lot of people are moving to a state that they feel fits their values and their culture. They don't want to move. You know, if you are if you own 1,000 guns, you're probably not moving to Chicago, right? You're not gonna. Trust me. I don't carry a gun in my car, but for a while I did, and I'm like, I don't really want to drive to Illinois with a gun in my car because I know what they'll do to me. They'll put me in jail. So I'm not going to move to Illinois because I've got a couple guns. And so those are things that, depending upon your situation. So that's the other thing is that they don't really know, is they don't know who's moving where and what they're like. Because just because 60% of a state's Democrat, that means 40% is Republican, or 60% is Democrat. So the 40% could be moving there or there. And so that's what you're seeing with the data. So I don't know the answer to that question. That is a great question, Draw. It's above my head. But I do know there was a gentleman that I tried to sponsor to be an American citizen here. And because he was here illegally, they would not let me sponsor him. So the process that he had to go is he could deport himself, and then he could wait till he got approved for a green card from me. And then once he got a green card, he could start the process, and it was going to be $10,000 to be a citizen. Now, not to bring up hot issues in this one, but this gentleman lives here in the community. He used to work for a factory locally, and what they would do is there's something called E-Verify. You guys know what E-Verify is? E-Verify is where they verify that your Social Security number is actually yours. Now, here's what's crazy. It takes 60 days for E-Verify to work. Now, if I go over to Tolliver's right now, and I give my Social Security number, in 5 minutes, they're going to approve me for a handgun. But it takes 60 days to be verified. It says, well, you know why? Because when he had the bad Social Security number, they fired him. And then another contractor hired him, and they started the 60 days over again. So this gentleman could never get a raise where he worked because he only worked for that company for. He could never get a 401k because. And so those factories don't want to change that. He worked there for 15 years, but he didn't. He worked there for 60 days. So every 60 days he's getting fired. And if you go to those companies, and if you look around Manchester, what do we have a lot of here in Manchester? What's the number one company you see? No, not cars. Like individual companies. There's a bunch of different of these little companies, and you don't really know what they do, but now you do. No? Well, they are like cash calls. I don't like those either. Employment services. Because, if you hire somebody with an employment service and you verify them, and they give you a Social Security number, and they're not hired, and it would take 60 days to figure it out. Once you verify their Social Security number is wrong, you can't hire them again for so many days. So they give you another Social Security number. So then another company, what? Hires them. Then they get fired, and another company hires them. And what that does, of course, is because they're actually providing a fake Social Security number, they're paying your Social Security. They're just never going to get it because it's not their number. And so there's a whole system in our country set up to not encourage people to become citizens because you get cheaper labor. And this family's a really good family. They go to church 3 times a week. Their kids are all trained to be doctors and engineers and good people. And they can't become citizens. And their one son, he's got a really bad disease, so he goes to Vanderbilt every week. And if he leaves, he'll die. So that's why I feel for him, personally.
Their kids become citizens, but even though they're not.
Right? And that's the oddest part is, okay, you have the taxpayer who's contributing. They're going to school for free because they got no income. I mean, see, this is not logical. but it's the system we have. Go ahead.
The immigration system.
Oh, it's terrible because,
I sponsored a young man not long ago, and it cost me $2,500 up front.
that's not bad.
I mean, then from there on, and he has now got, finally, after 3 years,
Become a citizen. But you see, we all know that there's not enough workers, right? There's a worker shortage. There's not enough millennials to replace the baby boomers. There's not enough kids, not enough people. Well, look, companies exist to make money. And if you create conditions, they don't care what the conditions are. They will do whatever it takes to make money. And so you create a situation where businesses want the cheap labor, but you still, these bad actors, these bad immigrants who are doing bad things, they need to be kicked out, but you've created a system where you can't kick them out. Like there was a gentleman who did some work for me, and he had beat his wife up 4 times, and they finally deported him, thank goodness. He'd get drunk, and he would beat his wife. Well, I didn't know that till he got deported. I never would have had him done concrete work for me. Hopefully he's not watching. Anyway, but the thing is I believe he actually came back, but the thing is that guy should never come back. If you've got 4 felonies, and you're beating people up, get the heck out of here. You know, put him in jail. I mean, that's how I look at it. Or just get rid of him. You know, but if you're actually contributing to society, we want those people. That's my personal view, which I won't get too much in politics on that anyway. But you also got to see that the system is set up based on making money. You know, because if you don't have to pay people $25 an hour, if you can get away paying 17, would businesses like to do that? Better believe it. You know, that's why you're also seeing the fastest rise in union membership in recent history in America, because there's not enough workers, so the workers can start saying, wait a minute. And if you look at the number 1 election issue, if you look at the undecided groups, why did Biden march with the union picketers, first president in American history? And why did Trump want to too? Because that's the demographic that's so critical to who wins the election. They're not dumb.
But with the laws like you're saying they are, wouldn't it be stupid for the companies to hire union workers when they hire these other workers all like you?
Absolutely. But it would be smart to import people that didn't have felonies, that wanted to be good Americans. You know, let there be a real way for me to hire somebody. You know, I'm going to give you an example. So, you know, I've got child care needs at my house. So we want to hire au pairs. Well, there's not an au pair station. They've got to be within so many miles of the center where they meet. They got to be within, and there's not one. We live in McMinnville. We're too far away. So you can't hire one. Now, with an au pair, you have to pay for them to be educated. You have to give them a house or a place to live and a car. And you got to pay them a pretty good wage. You've made it so hard to do it that I can't do it. Happy to do it. I'd love for my kids to speak Spanish because it's a good skill. It's going to make them more successful from the workplace. You know, so if I could get someone, or German, it'd be great because they're going to have another skill. They're going to learn something. That's a double win for me to spend money. That's how I look at it. But the system's so hard. But then if you come here illegally, I can hire you right now. So look at that, how crazy that is, right? You come here illegally, hire you tomorrow. But if I go correctly, you know, you got to follow the rules, and that's the problem. You know, but it's also financially incentivized because it's a lot cheaper to do it that way. So as long as the money is for that situation, it's not going to change. Because companies exist to make money. So as long as the conditions allow them to do it, they're going to do it. You know, that's how it is. And think about this, right? Why does E-Verify take 60 days? Come on. I mean, if the president got shot, we would know in 2 seconds on our cell phones. You guys would begin alerting, but it takes 60 days to verify your Social Security number. But if you want to get a gun, it takes 5 minutes. I mean, come on, right? I mean, all this technology, we can't verify someone's identity in 60 days. If you want to keep illegal immigrants out, all you got to do is what? Get a faster computer. Because if you can't hire people, guess what you won't do? You don't need a wall. You're not going to eat. Oh, I'm not coming here. Okay. Pretty simple. Anyway, so let's talk about how do I still get a 3% mortgage? A lot of people don't realize this. Of course, I I got a friend of mine who always wants to buy my house, and I never want to sell my house because my mortgage is under 3%, because I'd have to give up the mortgage, and I'd have to get an 8% mortgage on my new house, so I wouldn't want to sell my house. And so how do you still get a 3% mortgage? This is good for you too, Hayden. Is there's something called an assumable mortgage. So you have the right in some mortgage products to, even if no one's defaulted on a mortgage, you can assume somebody else's mortgage. Okay? Now this is really, really a pretty cool thing. Because let's say they bought the house for 150 grand or more, and they still have $150,000 mortgage on it. And let's say that now the house is worth 250, right? So they're going to sell you the house for 250. But if you're going to go buy a new house and you're going to have to pay 7 or 8% on the mortgage, you don't love that, right? You want a cheaper mortgage. So what you do is you assume they're a $150,000 mortgage, and you bring $100,000 in cash, or you get a second mortgage on that house, and then you buy it. Now, only 1% of realtors are advertising this. Why do you think that's the case? Yeah, because the mortgage company, they sell you a new mortgage, you get all the mortgage fees. And realtors, mortgage people, and lawyers tend to be pretty tight. If you look around town, hopefully they're not watching right now, probably some of them are, they tend to have friends that they go to. If you go to a certain mortgage broker, you're probably going to get a certain lawyer. You know, it all kind of flows based on these groups. And they don't want to cut out of the pie, and a lot of them don't even know about it too. A lot of people don't even know that you can assume somebody's mortgage who's not in bankruptcy or in trouble. That you could just assume the mortgage. Now there's a couple rules here. Only certain types of loans are assumable. So FHA loans, Department of Agriculture, and VA. Now this is really important because in our area, because we're in a rural community, there are a ton of loans done through the Department of Agriculture and through the VA. We don't have a lot of we have some FHA loans, but there's a lot of people in our community that were veterans. There's a lot of people in our community that live in rural areas and have farms. So a lot of people don't realize these loans are assumable. And to me, I think you should charge more for a house with a 3% loan than one with a new 8% loan because you have assets you're transferring to them. So you should get paid for it. But this is pretty cool. So if you know anybody that's looking for a house, or let's say you're buying rental property, and you happen to see somebody like, well, hey, why don't I just take your loan over? You know, and one of the cool things, of course, is you have what's called a deed of trust. A deed of trust tells you, you know, if there was a mortgage ever taken out on the property. So you can kind of figure that out. But only 1% of loans are done that way, or they're actually advertising right now. But I bet you there's a good chance that 20 to 30% of all the loans, at least in this country, are that way. They're assumable. And the people don't know it. So anyway, unfortunately, my mortgage is not assumable because I was thinking about cutting a deal with a friend of mine. I'm like, we could figure something out here. And I charge him more for the, you know, for the assumable loan. But it's not assumable. And actually, one other way you can check is if you look at your mortgage document, it'll say it in there. But it is a couple hundred pages usually, so you got to figure it out. So, but you can. But a lot of times, the mortgage company, if you call them and ask them, they probably don't want to tell you it's assumable. Why? Why don't you get a new one? Yeah. Now you do have to be approved by the mortgage company for a loan. So what's odd is you get approved for a loan, then you say, I'm going to get assumed a loan. Because that is a condition anyway. Okay, so let's talk about NVIDIA and artificial intelligence. Okay. Anybody ever heard of NVIDIA before? Anybody hear about them 2 years ago, 5 years ago? Probably not. So NVIDIA, I've heard about. So my brother's an IT person. My dad's an IT person as well. And so I always remember when I was a kid, my brother plays all these really very, very intense computer games that like take 12 or 14 hours straight of gaming. So my little brother doesn't watch this, but all I remember going to his room is saltine crackers and Diet Pepsi or something in his room. And I swear that's what he lived on for I'm like, are you going to die in here, man? Like, you haven't left the room in half a day. And he used to work with me, so he wouldn't get up in the morning, so I had to go kick him. Get up. We're going to work. I don't care if you were gaming. It's 5 a.m. It's bright and early. Time to get going. We're cutting some moss. And so NVIDIA recently overtook Apple to be the second most valuable company in the world. And recently, nobody had ever heard of them. So they basically came up with a new chip called the H100. So right now, customers have to wait at least 6 months, typically, to get these chips. Okay? And so what's really interesting about this chip, of course, it's a nod to the computer science pioneer Grace Hopper, or Hopper. You've probably never heard of before, but apparently she's one of the first people to come up with, some of the computing information on it. That's why they call it the H100, because it's after her last name. And so if you look at the new artificial intelligence stuff, it's a beefier version of graphics processing. But what makes this chip so valuable, because it's actually not the most sophisticated chip on earth, is what makes this chip so valuable is it basically works as like a commander, right? So it can basically tell other chips what to do. So it basically is able to work in tandem. And that's really, really important because if you look at when we do generative artificial intelligence, what they're doing is they have to watch, they have to see information to be able to process it. Kind of like your brain, right? If you got your brain here and you guys see this floor and you look at this floor and you guys know the color is brown. But why do you know the color is brown? You're taught it by who? The teacher, right? That told you all the colors. You're a little kid, right? This one's gray, this one's brown, this one's orange. You get your primary, your red, your... And so what generative AI does is it takes the information that says this color is brown. And then it looks at the floor and says, oh, that color is brown. And so what NVIDIA, their chip does is that is really hard to do for a computer. So what NVIDIA's chip does is it's able to put all that together through commanding multiple chips at the same time and doing that together. And that's how generative AI works. It works like your brain. You've got a neural network in your brain, and all these things are telling you. Your eyes tell you that color, and your mind tells you what? The color's brown. But if you're speaking Spanish, I don't know the color brown in Spanish, but it's a different name. Because that's what the people in England called it. The people in Spain call it something else. And that's what NVIDIA does. Well, right now, this company was only founded in 1993. They make 92% of data center GPU technology. 92% of these high-quality chips are made by one company. Of course, what's really amazing is they're all made in this little town in Taiwan, which I think I got that later on. See if I can find the name of the town. Oh, yeah, here it is. Hishinshu. I'm going to spell it. H-S-I-N-C-H-U. So if you go to Taiwan, oh man, this is a bad moment. I'm drawing. So let's say it's like Taiwan, it's a little island like that. You got Taipei, which is right here, and then Hsinchu is right here. That little country called China, just right over here. Right now, unfortunately for us, it's on this side of the mountain, not on that side of the mountain, because in the middle of Taiwan is a big mountain. And Hsinchu is right where? On this side of the mountain, not on that side of the mountain. Because on this side of the mountain, missiles are going to be easier to hit than on that side of the mountain. Because the U.S. military, if we go to war with China, the aircraft carrier is going to be stationed on that side of the mountain, and they'll be firing on this side of the mountain. But 92% of those chips are made by NVIDIA, and they're all made in that one little town. By the way, Intel, all the major chip manufacturers all make their chips in this town right here. So one of the biggest problems for our country as we're trying to catch up with making our chips here is we don't have the people that know how to make these chips. So you talk about immigration, right? If I'm Intel, if I'm Qualcomm, American chip companies, what's one of the people I want to, who the people I want to bring here? Did you happen to grow up in Henshu? How do we get you to come here? I've said it wrong, I'm sure. So you got to get someone that knows how to say it correctly, and you would be like, what? Would you like a visa? How about would you like to live here permanently for the rest of your life? By the way, you're on this side of the mountain. We're over here in Tennessee, way away from them. Right? And so that's been Taiwan's defense strategy, of course, is they knew if they made all the chips that America would never let them fall because they'd say what? Well, 92% of these chips are made where? There, in that little town. Anyway, I hadn't looked it up till yesterday, so I thought that was kind of funny. But NVIDIA is changing the world with chips, but the amount of chips that are needed in order for all this stuff to work that they want to do is insane. Intel is building factories, Qualcomm, they're building factories here. All these chip companies are having to build these crazy amount of factories to try to replace all these workers because all the baby boomers are retiring. And we all know that what someone at McDonald's making in California now, is it 20 bucks an hour or 25? Okay, well, companies exist to make money. And if you start paying people $25 an hour to work at McDonald's, you got to pay everybody else more than that. Which means you start seeing a little kiosk. Because a kiosk doesn't have rights. If I get mad at my computer, I can hit it with a hammer and I don't go to jail. Right? So that's what you're seeing. So McDonald's is automating. Well, this chip is going to allow them to automate making your food. And if you think that's not happening, and by the way, that's been the biggest driver of the stock market gains this year, are companies related to artificial intelligence. Because they are making a ton of money. Because this is changing the world. Just like I was in, he usually comes here, he's not here today, Bill Nichols has a Tesla, and he hates when I talk about it. But he pulled up, and they were doing the free trial of self-driving. Because, Bill's really cheap, won't spend the money on it, so hopefully he's not watching. And so we get in the car. Bill, I'm sure you'll spend the money now. Sorry, I should have said that. But anyway, I really shouldn't have said that. But we get in the car, and he's like, let's take me to O'Charlie's. He didn't touch the car at once, and it drove all the way to O'Charlie's. It was the coolest thing because we're in the car, and it's seeing the other side of Interstate 24 on the chart. To me, which is the coolest thing because what's it doing? It does what we're doing. And it was safer driver than I'll ever be. And if you look at Teslas, they're like 99% safer than every other car because there's no distracted driving. I was running yesterday, and this kid at 5 in the morning was doing this. I don't know how I didn't get hit by him. He wasn't paying attention while he's driving. When a Tesla gets near me when I'm running, you know what it does? It slows down. Every time it sees me, there's about 4 or 5 Teslas in McMinnville, and every time one comes near me, it slows down. I feel a lot safer as a runner outside. I'm just telling you about with that car. But this company right here is now the second most valuable company in the world. And they've already got a 6-month backlog on this chip. And if you look at their earnings, it's crazy. It's like, they're up, they're up 1,000% in the last 12 months.
That's probably, I know it's on the news yesterday where they said that, I guess, 10,000 more fast food workers are laying off in California right now.
Sure. Well, because it's not personal. It's like if you go to eat fast food and it's $11 to eat fast food, you're going to reduce your number of trips. And the companies exist to make money. And a lot of fast food tasks are repetitive in nature. And so if you look at, I don't know if you guys go to restaurants as much as I do. As you can tell, I go too much. They're always doing takeout orders. And it's like the restaurant's not even that full, but all these people are coming in to get food because it's all digital, right? You know, like Instacart, where we ordered some of our groceries for today. You know, in the past, we had some employees, one in particular, that would go out and buy the food. She ended up just, stealing food on the company dime for a while, unfortunately. So one of the things as an employer I can do is, we just don't want anybody to go out with a credit card. We just buy it and have it delivered here. No temptation. No issue. Just sent here. Right? We got to worry about Darla, but otherwise, okay. Anyway, so, I'm just kidding, Darla. But anyway, but that's what we do. And it's also, sometimes, not Darla, but some employees might, it took an hour and a half to go to lines, over the food line and come back. I'm like, and now it's just they bring it here. Well, that's where you're seeing a lot more digital automated stuff. And even I remember I went to Taco Bell after church, not last night because we were gone, but Sunday before, and they're like, if you want to order this many tacos, you could have called ahead. I'm like, okay, I got 9 people. There's 7 kids. I want to order tacos. Kiss my butt. Anyway, so I'm here to buy tacos. And they're basically telling me, you need to order these on the app because we don't talk to people. I'm like, okay, nice. I'm not going back there till tomorrow. But that's what you're doing. So that's kind of what they're going to allow to happen, and they're going to automate all those jobs away. I mean, that's what you're seeing. And that's why, if you look at like Tesla, of course, what makes Elon Musk such a genius is not really that he's such a genius, it's that he basically has used technology to reduce the workforce. So the reason why it only cost him $25,000 to build a Tesla is because they press it all together. And you can see this with a Tesla, right? Because a Tesla is an ugly car. Ugliest car I've ever seen. Because the edges are all smooth. There's no flavor to it. It's just plastic. But what it does do is when they make a Tesla, they just what? Done. There's no people. And that's why if you look at, actually I did this on another video for our podcast, is you're looking at one of the reasons why car insurance companies are going out of business is it costs so much money to repair a car. If you look at State Farm, the number one cause of State Farm's downgrade is they underestimated what it would cost to repair your car. And see, if you got a Tesla, you don't repair it, you're eventually going to what? Throw it away. Like your iPhone, right? If my iPhone breaks, and it's probably worth $400, and I go to Telehome and they fix it, it'll cost me $400. Yeah, or $500. So what do I do if my iPhone breaks? I go get another one. And all automotive is being moved that way. Because it's so expensive to have people work on your car, so you just what? Build a new one. No different than your washing machine, your TV. I mean, nobody fixes a TV anymore. Your TV's broken, do you get it fixed? I still remember when the repair guy came to my house to fix my dad's TV, and he told him how much money it was, and my dad called him bait and switch. Because he said $700 to fix a TV worth $300. And a $100 service fee. Because end of the day, nobody repairs TVs anymore, you throw them away. And that's where cars are going to too. Okay, so Saudi Arabia. Has anybody been watching the news on them? There has been a ton of news involving our country and Saudi Arabia in the last week and a half. You guys know that? Incredible amount of news. Okay, so on Sunday, I think it was Sunday or Saturday, the Biden administration announced that Saudi Arabia has been, let's start with this. Saudi Arabia has a bunch of, what, if you got a bunch of oil, you get, what do you get for that oil? A lot of money, right? And typically Saudi Arabia does not have a high amount of work that Saudi Arabians do. They have a lot of people there they import that do the work for them. So if you're in a country where, let's say, I don't know the numbers, but let's just guess 20% of the people there are actual Saudis and 80% are workers from other countries, what do you fear if you're that country? Yeah. Like, remember, I went to Peru and everybody had a gun. And we were staying in a beach house, and everybody was starving. They're going to get wise one day. They're going to kidnap me. They're going to get more money. And so Saudi Arabia has been looking for somebody to be their military protector. Because if you look at history, what countries have typically controlled the Middle East? You guys know? Well, yeah, England. The country's in Saudi Arabia. But you're right, England. England's an option, yeah. Actually, it's a really good option. Economists were saying they'll deal with them. Persia. And there's really two more. Syria's very back and forth. No. Well, that's Persia. Iran's Persia.
Yeah,
Egypt and Turkey. If you look at the empires in the country, and so obviously if you know, Persians are Shia Islamic, the majority. Saudi Arabians and Egyptians are Sunni Arabs, which I'm probably saying it wrong, but that's generally speaking, there's some different breaks there. Turkey tends to be more moderate Sunni, but they tend to be more moderate, but they also have these people called the Kurds that they're always trying to kill. Well, they are killing. And so these are the countries, right? Now, what's cool about America now? We produce our own oil. Who's the biggest competitor to Saudi Arabia? Us. But the rest of the world doesn't want to be reliant upon us, right? So Saudi Arabia and the Middle East has a lot of oil, a lot of energy, but they don't have us anymore because we don't need them. We don't. We've got enough oil here to take care of ourselves. By the way, electric cars will work when the new batteries come out in the next 5-6 years, and your car will be powered by you can buy an electric car, and you'll have a diesel generator because you want to be power, But that's what's going to happen. I'm going to have a diesel generator here at the office, and you're going to hear it's going to be loud. Power's going to go out, and we're going to be running on a generator because we don't have enough power plants. I can already tell you it's going to happen. But Saudi Arabia is looking for somebody to keep the people at the gates, keep them away from them. They're looking for a friend. So in comes a gentleman named Joe Biden. And he said, we're going to give you the same deal we give Japan. That if somebody invades Japan, we'll nuke them. We'll kill them. This is a big deal. No other country, even England, has that deal. After we blew up Japan, we rebuilt them and said, no more military for you. We'll do it for you. If anybody messes with you, we'll kill them. And my grandfather fought the Japanese. It's a pretty good deal. They're pretty terrible people to fight. Win-win. I worked in Japan. My dad ran a Japanese company. Great people now. Good friends. We're not killing each other. So Saudi Arabia, so Joe Biden's offered them a deal. We're going to give you the same deal Japan gets. You get all the best weapons. You get all of our best stuff. But you got to do one thing. What do you think the thing is? Nope. You got to get Israel to tell the Palestinians they get a country. And then Israel, you're going to recognize Israel, and you're going to be the Arabic country that says Jewish people have the right to be in Israel. Which is hilarious to me because, the history of all that. Now, I don't know what the Jewish people are going to do, but I do know there's an election this year. And if we start looking at data, let's go into money first. So Saudi Arabia is looking for a military protectorate. They're also trying to get investors' money. They know that they have to have an economy beyond oil. They can't just have all their economy based on what? One thing. Because eventually oil is going to go down and something else is going to replace it. So they got to have something when it goes south. And so they did an $11 billion offering over the weekend where they sold part of Saudi Aramco. I always remember Texas Aramco, I think is what it's called. That was actually owned by them. It was kind of a funny thing, Texas. Anyway. And they're paying a 6.6% dividend now on their stock if you invest in that investment. Okay. But what we're looking at here is a very interesting thing. Saudi Arabia wants a friend. The United States is offering to be their friend, but really does it benefit us to be their friend? Kind of not. The countries that really need Saudi Arabia to produce oil are Japan, Great Britain, Germany, and most of Europe. But if they don't buy it from them, who are they going to buy it from? Us. Because Russia was there in the play, but Russia's now what? They their production keeps going down because when they don't have people. By the way, there's a company called Hess Oil. You guys ever heard of them? Hess Energy. They're getting purchased, I believe. So Nikita Khrushchev's favorite American was the guy. I forget the Hess. It's because he built all the oil pipelines for the USSR. U.S. companies built all that oil infrastructure for them, and now U.S. companies aren't going there. Guess who maintained all that stuff? Oh, U.S. companies. Guess who's not there right now? What could go wrong? I mean, you're hauling a bunch of oil. Doesn't catch on fire or anything, right? You know what the Ukrainians have been doing? They've been going down to the refineries 1,000 miles away from the front. They've been blowing up the refineries. Because they're smart. If you want to stop Russia, you don't hit them with a tank. You kill their money. They want to win. They're going to have to do a lot more of that. But right now, the other game in town is here. And this is where this election matters so much, because if you look at Biden, Biden is more of a U.S. globalist type picture. We want Saudi Arabia to do well because we want Europe to do well. We want Japan to do well. What kind of person is Trump? Put my hand in their neck. Then I'll get them to do well. They'll do what they tell them, right? And so when you're looking at this situation, this makes a big difference. But here's some other statistics to make it even more interesting. Is Jewish Americans, as we all know, are typically pretty wealthy. Would you guys agree with that? Generally speaking, they're very heavily involved in political fundraising. Okay? But check this out. 241,828 Muslims live in the state of Michigan. And Biden won Michigan by 155,000 votes in 2020. And Trump won Michigan by 11,600 votes in 2016. Who's mad about the Israeli thing? Who's marching? Muslim people, right? They're the ones that are mad. I'm not saying I'm not happy about it either. I'm saying the people that are actually actively rioting and doing stuff are who? Muslim Americans. And here is a deal that I don't think is going to happen, personally. But if it does happen, who benefits a lot? Well, Biden. Because if he gets that deal done, he's going to get a bunch of money and he's going to get a bunch of votes. Right? Not that that would ever play into people's things. And 149,561 Muslims live in Pennsylvania. Those two groups could likely decide who wins this election. Because it's going to be probably by 10,000 to 100,000 votes. And so, of course, the challenge is, in our very short history of America versus these people, I mean, these countries have been around for thousands of years. This history is a lot longer than our history. Can someone solve this for an election cycle? I got a hard time believing it. But what's interesting about this is you're seeing, because America has produced so much oil, because we've produced so much energy, the whole world has changed. Think about this. Russia is going offline, and we're still not paying $10 a gallon for gas. I mean, that's pretty incredible, don't you guys think? I mean, they're producing 11 million barrels a day, and they're going down every day, and we just keep adding more. You know? And of course, Russia sells most of their oil now to China and to India because they're out of the main system. But Grady, your point is right. Is the countries that really care about them the most, about Saudi Arabia, is England, France, Germany. So if Trump comes in office and he says, I'm done with this crap, we're not getting involved anymore, who's likely to take over? The Europeans or the Japanese, right? Because they need that oil. They need that energy. And just like every other business person, they don't want to have to only buy it from us. They want some competition in here on the price. Because if we wanted to, we could shut off for all the rest of the world and say, nope. By the way, we're closing the ocean down too. We see a cruiser, we sink a cruiser. No Russian ships. The next day, oil prices in Europe would be what? $40 a gallon. We'd own the whole world. That's why we don't run our country like an empire, because if we wanted to, we could. Think Putin would do it that way? And so that's what you're looking at. But this is a really interesting story for us as investors, because there is going to be more opening up of Saudi Arabia to investors. These oil fields are going to be open, and you might see some more colonies again. We might be going back to a colonial system where you go out there and get your stuff. Because if you're England, you need that oil, right? If you're France, you need that oil. And then, of course, Saudi Arabia does not want to be run by the Persians, because the Sunnis and Shias are killing each other. And the Egyptians are broke. They got a bunch of people that only eat because we give them food. We actually give them food every day. And then Turkey, so they're looking pretty sharp. Yeah, I forget the guy's name, but he's elected twice now. And so that all plays a part in this. Of course, our big challenge for our country is the solid state battery for electric cars, which that'll get you 600 miles a charge, and it costs about half as much as a current battery, and that's going to be mass produced in 5 years. So when those things start getting mass produced and you can get 600 miles on charge, by the way, it charges in 5 minutes. When that happens, you'll drive an electric car. Because it'll be so cheap, you won't care when the battery goes out. If it's $5,000, shoot, you're losing engine, it's going to be more than $5,000. And the cars will be incredibly cheap. And you'll be using a generator to power your house. Because then electricity is going to do what? Because we're not building enough power plants to cover this. But every automotive company in the world is pushing that battery. And they say 5 to 6 years it'll be mass produced. So when that occurs, and the cars will be $25,000, think about that, guys. That'll change it. Everybody works on payments. Even then they buy a cell phone. It's on a payment plan with Verizon. That's why I write a check, but everybody else is different. It is. Okay. But it doesn't have any cobalt. Okay. And has less lithium. And so they've developed, they just can't mass produce it yet. But they know it works. They know it uses less lithium. And it's coming. Go ahead.
How does caching all this stuff work in with their green?
That doesn't work. Yeah. Oddly enough, throwing away all your stuff isn't a great plan for the environment, but that's not what we're talking about here. I don't like that part of it, but I didn't say it was always smart, because the average car in America makes it for 12 years on the road today is the average car, and the average car in the future is going to be 5 to 6 years, and you're going to throw it away. And if you go to China right now, that's what they're doing. The old electric cars, look at Hertz, right? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Hertz stock is $3 a share, because they bought all those electric cars, and they're like, okay, now we're going to resell them. Who wants to buy a used Tesla that was owned by renters? But they can't even get $25,000 a car. So your used car is going to have no value. But it's going to be cheaper. And most people are focused on what is cheaper. I'm not saying it's smart. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you should go out, run out and buy it. I'm just saying where the market's heading. And when you can get a $300 a month payment and you can have a car that can go 0 to 60 in 1 second, which is dirt fast, people are going to say, okay, I'll take that. And if you ask my kids, do they want a hot rod Mustang or a GTO? That's what I like. No. What does Alyssa want? Oh, I really want a Tesla. I'm going to have a Tesla when I get older, Daddy. You're going to have an ugly car. But okay, that's what they want. And so you already can tell, my daughter is 10. So in 6 years, she's going to be 16. She'll be driving. So that's the change. I'm not saying I'm buying one. Well, I mean, I would because it's self-driving. Because I think it's cool because I'm a bad driver in terms of paying attention. I'm always distracted. Can't imagine. And so that's not a positive. Yeah. Well, I'm fine, but I'm looking at the market. So something's going on. I might be throwing something down. Anyway, go ahead. What were you gonna say? Oh, we have tons of lithium here. We actually have tons of cobalt in Idaho. You just can't, the way you drill cobalt is you poison all the water for 40 miles around it. So, if you live around it, it's not wonderful. Because Idaho actually had the biggest cobalt discovery, but they're not going to use cobalt. It's going to be all lithium, and it's going to be an environmental disaster. And you already see it in China. China has millions of electric cars they've thrown away. Throw them away, trashed them, gone. So, but they're cheap, and frankly, unfortunately, do people care? Oh man, not really. They should.
I saw an article that said the biggest supply of that is in Russia.
So, the biggest processor of lithium is in China. Most lithium comes from Africa, if I'm not mistaken. But the only people that can process it into electric batteries is China. And so one of the things that's a little bit more of a political discussion, if you looked at, there was a hearing for Ford Motor Company a week and a half ago on U.S. Congress, like, hey, why are you partnering with China? And Ford says they're the only ones that can make batteries. Because what China did, they don't have a lot of lithium. Russia probably does have some too. But they process it into the battery components. And so our country is trying to catch up by building processing facilities. There's a lot of lithium in Nevada, a lot of lithium in Eastern California. That kind of climate is where lithium. Well, that kind of climate, I don't know if this is true for China, exists in Western China. That kind of climate exists in lots of Russia and a lot of Australia. And then also Chile has some. There's a lot of lithium. It's more just we don't have the facilities to process it. But the solid state battery needs less of it, and it only needs it, basically. So it's more efficient, and it charges quicker. 600 miles, 5 to 10 minute charge. Game changer. You can charge in 10 minutes. You'll buy an electric car if it's cheap enough. But you're still going to get your power from somewhere. So we're going to have to change how we charge for electricity, right? You're going to have to charge you more during the day and less at night to encourage people to charge their car at night. But here's the other thing. You can put those batteries on the grid, and they could do it for us. They could put those batteries on the grid, and they could use, during the day when we're using all that power, those batteries are being used, and at night, they're charging them. So they'll do something, but I'm just saying right now, I'm a little bit nervous about that. But it's a great investment, by the way. Utility stocks could, for the first time in our lifetime, become a growth company because they're building new power plants. They can charge more for power.
I thought Australia was basically doing that. They were building a bank of battery system,
There.
and they're charging those and then using that rather than running a power plant.
Correct. That's what Elon Musk's company did the deal with them, and they are doing that deal. But Australia's unique because their climate is a little different than ours because it's, only the eastern part of Australia is habitable, and so they've got a different thing. The thing that people don't think about electricity, which is a very important thing, is where does a lot of our electricity come from? What product? What's the biggest product? Not nuclear, not solar, not wind. What is it? Natural gas. And natural gas right now is free because it's a byproduct for drilling for oil. Do you hear me? You drill for oil, you get free natural gas. If you stop drilling for oil, so what's the price of natural gas going to do? Well, it's a good thing TVA is only building natural gas facilities pretty much.
Then I have a friend that works in the coal industry,
Yeah.
and they go in first and pump all the natural gas
Out.
first before they mine the coal. So they're piping it off. And this is in Alabama,
Well, see,
North Alabama.
oddly enough, we're going to see probably coal turn back on because you can convert natural gas power plants to coal and back and forth really easy. And they've converted all the coal to natural gas. Once their natural gas gets more expensive, they're going to convert it back to, when what they could do right now is build nuclear power. And if they did that, it's clean, everybody wins, it's efficient, and you can make this transition. But nobody's having the full conversation. The markets don't care. The markets will just play by the rules and they'll make money. And if they can make more money selling coal, or they can make more money selling natural gas. But for me, as an American, I don't want there to be a lot more greenhouse gases. But also, I don't want to have to import stuff from Saudi Arabia. So I'd build nuclear just to get rid of them because I don't want my kids to have to fight them. If they're all poor throwing rocks at each other, they can't kill my kids or me. That's a win-win. That's a good investment decision. That's my opinion. And it's also a Republican and Democratic win because both parties get what they want. That's how I look at it.
Fear is we don't have the people that are responsible, controlled enough and thinking enough to operate nuclear plants.
Maybe. But if you look at nuclear, it's true, but like right here, we're getting powered by the Chattanooga power plant right here. So you've got nuclear all over the country. So if they start going bad, well, we're already screwed because we've already built them everywhere. And that new one, I mean, if you look at where we are, right, just in particular here with TVA, the new plants are in Georgia and Alabama and north of us. So we're like a nuclear wasteland because they're all around us. And that is the fear, but there are new plants, new facilities that work differently so you don't have the same engineering. So one of my good friends was a nuclear engineer in Dubai, and some of the new plants they build, once they built 5, they're building 5 new plants, they got 4 done, they're building the 5th one, because they're going to export nuclear power to their friends, is you can put them in where once you stop putting fuel in, they just stop, versus the meltdown. You know, the nuclear technology that we use today is developed in the 50s, the 60s. A lot of the new nuclear stuff that we're not using, once you basically imagine you put some fuel in there, once it runs out, it's out. And they're set up to where they don't cause this massive radiation event. You know, and so there's newer technology that we're not using. So you're setting yourself up for a disaster because you're using something that was built before my dad was born. You know, not good. So we'll look at the Federal Reserve, and then we'll be done. So the Federal Reserve meets, they're meeting right now, but they'll make up tomorrow. So there's a big question mark right now for the economy and the world. A lot of people think the economy's slowing down, and some people think the economy's just right. Who knows? I guarantee you a year from now we'll know the answer. For today, not for a year. And so if you look at some data points, so we saw on Friday that the U.S. employers added 272,000 new jobs versus 180,000 was the expectation. So you saw the market drop, and then it started coming back, but bonds went down a lot on Friday. Well, oddly enough, that same week, they came out with data and said, well, actually, we've overestimated how many new jobs we created last year by 720,000. So when you look at job data, it's very, very fickle. Because I can hire somebody and not keep them. Especially in like Tennessee, right? Because Tennessee is an at-will state. So you can fire anybody for like, you know, hey, I don't like those shoes. You're gone. You don't need a reason. You understand what I'm saying? You just can fire somebody for anything you want. And so a lot of times when they do employment data, it's very fickle. Because they really don't know how many people are employed because they could be temp workers. They could have hired a bunch of people. There could be like, I forget, it was in New York. They got unemployment during spring break or something, or fall break. It was spring break. There's like 200,000 bus drivers, and they got unemployment for a week because of spring break. And they all got taken unemployment for a week because they weren't working and getting paid. Well, that caused the numbers to go crazy. I mean, so you have all these weird events. So unemployment's not a great number. What we do know is the European Central Bank, they cut rates. Last week. So they're already cutting interest rates. They don't think inflation's an issue anymore. They're already cutting them. And so it's very, very hard. The Federal Reserve has made a terrible decision, in my opinion. They want inflation to be exactly 2%. Well, trying to land an aircraft carrier that flies on that light switch out there, it's not easy. And they've never, ever done this until Jerome Powell became the head guy. They used to say that we want to be in range of 2 to 4%. And he says what? 2% on the dot. And that's probably a huge mistake, and they'll probably change their policy eventually. But basically what the Federal Reserve keeps doing in their meetings is they say, yeah, we're not where we need to be in inflation, but we're still probably cutting rates at the end of the year. But it's weird because they always said, well, whatever the data says. Now they said, we're going to do something, even though the data is not necessarily saying it. What's the number one election issue people are talking about? Inflation. If you look at grocery store, the average American goes to the grocery store 3 times a week. And they're voting based on that. It's funny, though, because neither candidate has said a specific way they're going to stop printing money. I'll give you examples. So yesterday, Trump said, anybody that gets a tip from a waitress, they're not going to pay taxes on that. That's what he said. And then what did Joe Biden do? We're going to forgive all these student loans. What do both of those actions create to? Inflation. So you're telling people what they want to hear, but you're not telling them what's needed to do to fix inflation. If you want to fix inflation, you spend less money and you generate more taxes. Only way to fix it. Government borrows less money. If the government borrows less money, there will be less inflation. It's very simple. Republicans and Democrats, until recently, believed in that for 50 years. And they worked together to get it done. Okay, so the big issue is going to be when they cut rates. So we're going to see. So right now, there's going to be a dot plot. Will be the big thing they watch tomorrow. And the dot plot is where people say when they're going to cut rates. They think they may cut rates at this point. What a joke, right? And so what you see with the Federal Reserve is we'll see a big move probably tomorrow and Thursday. And then after a couple weeks, you just kind of all what? Forget about it. And then July, it'll happen again. And then of course, the biggest thing though is going to be right now how many bonds they reinvest. See, before last month, the Federal Reserve was burning $95 billion a month. And I firmly believe that policy was the biggest help to reduce inflation by getting rid of the 2% mortgages. If you start doing 8% mortgages, people don't buy houses. If they can't afford a house, price of housing goes what? If it goes down, inflation goes down with it. They stopped burning as much money last month. So the question is, they're going to keep that still burning money? Are they going to me, I think they should burn more money. Make it harder to borrow money because then prices will go back down. Because their printing of $7 trillion probably had something to do with all this inflation. But it's really hard to do that, right? Because we got an election. And it's just like if I tell my kids, you can't have that right now. That's not fun, but it is fun for me because it is learning. That's what they need. They don't need to eat 15 cookies. And so they don't need to go Taco Bell. So anyway, and so that's what you're looking at. So that's the big meeting tomorrow. Obviously, the greatest thing about this election being over this year, and the reason why the markets usually love it when an election's over, no matter who wins, is typically because all this finagling crap, all this maneuvering stops. Because they're all buying votes. It sucks. They don't want to tell you what you want to hear. They're just telling you what you want to hear, but not what you need. That's what stinks because it's not going to solve the problem. If you want to solve the problem, you stop spending so much money and you start raising taxes to pay for it. Then when the government borrows less money, inflation will do what? Go down. But companies don't care. Right now, you make it so expensive to hire people, they start buying more chips from NVIDIA. You're going to see more robots. Because companies don't care what the rules are. They just want to make money. And they will. So, any other questions on this guy? Awesome. Thanks for your time, guys. Thanks for coming. Sorry, I got a little warm in here at the end, I felt like. So.